Alright everyone, welcome along to another episode of Martin's World. Guys, before I get into introducing today's guest, I'd like to just remind you that if you want to support the show, support the fight for cannabis legalisation in Ireland, you can sign up to the patreon.com/Martin's World, or you can also make a donation in the form of Bitcoin through the link found on martinsworld.ie. All of the funds will be used to establish a cannabis activist hub here in Cork City to bring together the community so we can be better represented in the fight for cannabis legalisation in Ireland, and so we can hold some kick-ass social events as well. So guys, on with today's interview. It is with Darren White. Darren White is a native of New York, and he spent the majority of his first 30 years of his life working in a variety of military and law enforcement and high-level public service roles, including being named Cabinet Secretary in 1995 of the Department of Public Safety, effectively making him the state's Drug Czar. The Drug Czar, if you don't know, it's an informal name for the person who directs drug control policies in the state. He was also a two-term Bernalillo County Sheriff in the city of Albuquerque, and he was also the Albuquerque Public Safety Director, and after all of that then he's now a medical cannabis producer. So interestingly, yeah, he wasn't always a supporter of cannabis, and he wasn't too much of a believer of the medical benefits, and that wasn't until he was suggested to try some cannabis because of some chronic pain he was suffering with. Chronic pain to do with injuries, because he used to be jumping out of airplanes back in 1985 with the military paratroopers, and an injury made him have to retire early then. But it wasn't until about 2014, I think he said, 2015, when a friend said to try some medical cannabis to treat his back pain. And he was kind of blown away by it, so blown away that he started his own medical cannabis company. In January 2016, PurLife, which is his medical cannabis company, began their efforts with a small 3,000 square foot facility. And I believe now they have over 60,000 square feet, I believe, for growing cannabis. So they've really grown. Pardon the pun. So guys, on with the interview anyway. I'll give you Darren White. Enjoy, guys. Darren White, welcome along to Martin's World podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. You've got quite a past there, starting off with the airborne, the 82nd Airborne Regiment, and you kind of went on to be a police officer then afterwards on the beat, to be a sergeant, and later on in life a sheriff. So quite a past, a bit of experience there you have, and then to end up kind of come full circle into the world of medical cannabis then later on. But do tell me a little bit about your early beginnings there, and how does it that you went into the world of being a police officer?
Yeah, well, actually, I grew up just outside of New York City, and I was a pretty good baseball player, actually. And so I got a scholarship to play baseball in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went out there, and unfortunately, Martin, I was more worried about my batting average than I was my GPA, and I lost my scholarship. And my father was rather upset with me, and I was trying to get him to help me with going to a local school back in New York so I could get back to playing baseball, and he refused. Because I really had a gift handed to me to have my school paid for, and I lost it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a hard lesson learned. And so what I did was I joined the military. And believe it or not, I was able to learn that there was a baseball team at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And the only way that I could get to Fort Bragg, North Carolina is if I joined the Airborne.
Yeah.
And so they said to me, you've got to be willing to jump out of perfectly good airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if it gets me to continue to play baseball, I'll jump out of airplanes.
That's dedication.
And so I did it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. But I got hurt, Martin. I hurt my leg very bad.
Jumping out of the planes.
And playing ball. And so I went back to Texas because I really like the warm weather. I tried to play. I went to North Texas State, played there for a semester, but I was just too injured. I was an outfielder, and I wasn't able to recover from it. I grew up around a bunch of New York City police officers, and my childhood dream from watching shows like Adam 12 and then of course listening to these war stories as I've come to know them, That is something that I wanted to do. And so I became a Houston police officer. I was living in Texas. And so I became a Houston police officer. My son was born in Houston, and his mom didn't want to raise her son, our son, in Houston. She was from Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied to the police department here. And, and I was accepted. And one thing that was, for me though, Martin, is that I was raised, my father, in America, he was a liberal Democrat, very liberal Democrat. And I was raised watching, we have what we call the Sunday morning news shows, Meet the Press, Face the Nation. And my father really wanted me to become involved in politics. He felt it was important. So as a kid, I grew up watching all of these shows. And believe me, when I was little, it was kind of torture. But it set me on this course to where I got involved in politics. But I needed to wait until I got to Albuquerque. I got my job going. And so shortly after I was here, got promoted to sergeant, I got active in politics. Now, much to my father's chagrin, Martin, he was a liberal Democrat, but he always told me, I want you to keep an open mind, right? I want you to decide what it is that you value and what's important to you. When I was in the military, Ronald Reagan was the president. And I'd seen what had happened under President Carter. The military was not in really great shape, but it had gotten better. And so I ended up telling my father, I said, Dad, I've made up my mind. I'm going to be a Republican. And my father looked at me and he said, I didn't tell you to keep that much of an open mind. And I grew up thinking they were actually called damn Republicans, because that's the way my father referred to them. That set my course in politics and law enforcement. And so in 1993, I decided I was going to run for the state house in New Mexico. Okay. I also became very good friends with this construction worker who, contractor, he owned his own company, self-made millionaire. I fell in love with him because he was just, he was a triathlete. He was outside of the box. He was my generation. He was a conservative, and his name was Gary Johnson.
Okay, yeah, I know.
And Gary obviously is well known now as the first sitting governor in our state, in our country rather, who advocated the decriminalization of cannabis. Mm-hmm. So Gary won, I lost. And so Gary won, and I worked on his campaign. I was one of his writers for and policy advisors on crime. And I became his Secretary of Public Safety at 31 years old. I was the head of the state police, very young. And it was tough. It was a challenge, obviously, being that young. Yeah. But I loved the job, and I loved Gary. And Gary was real. Go ahead.
That role is also known as the drugs czar, I suppose, is kind of what it's also.
Part of my responsibility. I was the drug czar. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so as that role, could you just fill me in a little bit about that? Because I've often heard about it, but I don't understand it entirely.
Yeah. So of course, in New Mexico, we are part of the southwest border with Mexico. And for the 4 states, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, share 2,000 miles of border. We estimate that about 75% of all the illegal drugs that come into our country come through the southwest border. And a large portion of that would come through New Mexico because it was very porous. It wasn't very well protected, very remote. Mm-hmm. Albuquerque and New Mexico became a transshipment point for much of the drugs. And so it was important for us to have a very comprehensive drug policy because New Mexico is one of the most violent states in America. And most of it is fueled by drug violence and cartel violence. And so my role as drug czar was, one, I advised the governor on drug policy, but I also sat on a panel that advised the national drug czar from the ONDCP, Office of National Drug Control Policy. So I make no mistake, Martin, I was a street cop. I was the drug czar, and I was a drug warrior. I mean, I was responsible for enforcing our drug laws.
Yeah.
So after re-election, though, Gary is re-elected in 98. And shortly after that, he tells me that he wants to advocate for the decriminalization of marijuana. And I knew, because I was not only, Gary and I also, he wasn't my boss. Gary was my friend. He got me involved in cycling. I cycled once with him 700 miles. Nobody should do that, by the way. It's not recommended. But we were friends, and I worried because we were doing so many good things at the state. And remember, we're talking 1998.
Yeah.
That and now 99. And I was worried that that's what our last 4 years would be consumed with. That everything that Gary talked about would be framed from, yeah, but of course he also wants to legalize drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. He said all drugs, wasn't it? It wasn't just cannabis. He didn't stop there.
It's important, Martin. I did not resign because Gary, Governor Johnson, wanted to decriminalize marijuana. I was at that time, I was very vocal in that I supported the governor's call to reevaluate our national drug policy as it related to the drug war, because we were failing, and we were failing miserably. We were spending billions of dollars trying to control the flow of drugs into our country, and we weren't getting it done. And so that I welcomed. The cannabis, I was open and honest with them. I'm like, that's kind of goes against the grain of what I do, right?
Yeah.
And then remember, Martin, I also had about 1,000 people that worked in my agency that were law enforcement officers who were like watching everything I said.
Yeah.
And believe me, I was taking a lot of criticisms. I stayed in the job. I did it for a year. And the reason why I left was, and I defended Gary because I kept saying a conversation about national drug policy is important. But then Gary was in a press conference and he was asked the question, it sounds like you support the legalization of all drugs, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin. And God bless him, because he's one of the most honest people I ever met. He went, yeah, I do. And then I felt like I couldn't stand by his side. And so it was only fair that I stepped aside.
Because
I
of the
couldn't,
stigma and all of that
I just couldn't do it anymore. And at that point, everything we were trying to talk about, it actually came true. It was always, but first of all, of course, Gary just wants to legalize drugs. And so I left, and I actually became a news reporter for 2 years. I became a crime reporter, go figure. But I did it for 2 years, and I enjoyed it for one of our affiliates here. And I learned a lot about public relations. I learned a lot about how to deal with the media. I got a very good glimpse of what it was like to be behind the microphone, asking the questions. Set me up I ran for sheriff, and I won very easily, probably also because I was on TV every night. But people knew who I was. I won. I ran for re-election. I won again. I was very involved in President Bush's campaigns. I was actually the chairman of his campaign for New Mexico. I ran for Congress in 1998 because I felt the time was right. Martin, in politics, timing is everything.
Yeah.
And I'm also a political consultant. I do political consulting, so I should have known better.
I might be back in touch with you, so for some information. I've thrown my hat into the arena here recently for the Irish Dial. I had a run as an independent here in Cork City, and I actually topped the poll out of the independents that year, and it was my first outing. I got 291 votes, which was the best out of 5 independents running. So I was very happy.
And you need to do it again.
Oh, I would certainly do it again. And I ran on actually the policy of decriminalising all drug users and taking a health-led approach to the drug problem, because we kind of have issues here in Ireland, as I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's raids going on day in, day out. And the most recent one there in Cork City, there was 12 million euro worth of cocaine, over 100 kilos of cocaine found on a shipment coming in. And it's just an endless kind of supply. I don't know, you've seen it yourself, I suppose, over the years, that
Yeah,
it's just raid after raid after raid, and it's just like, like
we're
did,
not
did you
stopping.
ever did you ever ask yourself, I suppose, when you were doing it, is like, when is this going to end? When are the drug dealers going to run out of drugs for us to be going busting? Like,
They're not.
yeah,
You
that,
know, I will tell you that one of the things when I was a street cop, Martin, you know, we always said that, you know, we really had decriminalized
Mhm.
cannabis for the most part. Because
Okay.
I know even for myself, I would stop kids all the time, you know, and it's you'd walk up to the car, and I mean, this is literally like a Cheech and Chong movie, right? And you're like, "What are you guys doing? Nothing, really? Nice try." You'd make them dump it out. You know, it's like I didn't care, and I
Mhm.
also didn't want to take some kid that was 16, 17 years old and charge him with, you know, a small possession. And I also worked in very busy areas. I always liked that as well. But for many police officers, especially street cops, um, a lot of them would already decriminalize it. They make them dump it out. And I know that that still happens today. But you know, Martin, what I've realized over the past decade, we change, right? I mean, we do. I was you know, for many years, I was opposed to gay marriage. Um, I, why? I mean, why did I care? I
Yeah.
mean, you know, but I just felt like, you know, I'm a conservative, and you know, and then after a while, I thought about it, I'm like, oh, why should I tell two people who are in love with each other whether they should have? Is it really the government's role to say that you love each other, and because of that, we give you a piece of paper?
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, I changed on that. I was like, that's, and so we do, and I think that that's when we evolve,
Mhm.
as I like to say, we grow. And so that kind of leads me into, I retired, I was gone, a lot of injuries, um, you know, back surgery, knee replacement surgery, and a hell of a lot of pain from those injuries. And it was a friend of mine who said one day, I'm a big MMA fan. I love Conor McGregor. He's my man.
Lovely.
Um,
I
and
teach Thai
so,
boxing myself.
yeah, so in Albuquerque, actually, this is one of the Jackson's MMA.
Yeah, I know the gym.
It's
Yeah.
right. And so, I'm very good friends with Greg, and
Ah,
we
lovely.
were watching fights together, and I had to go home because you know, my neck and my back were so sore. And somebody offered me cannabis rubs. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, 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 I can't do that. That would be wrong. Blah. And, and my wife at the time went, shut up. You're
Yeah.
not, it's a cream.
Mhm.
And she's like, nobody's going to kick the door in and arrest you because you're the sheriff and you put a little marijuana cream on your neck. Martin, I will tell you, I was skeptical. I thought it was, you know, I just didn't think it was real.
Yeah.
Within 30 to 40 minutes, I literally went from wanting to leave as quick as I could to going, that bothered me a little while ago?
Yeah.
It worked.
And that was just from the rub, a topical on the outside of
It
your
was a
skin.
topical.
Yeah.
It's strong. It was, you know, it worked. And from there, that was my first, like, wow,
Mm.
I gotta say,
This
somebody
is
that,
about 4 years into medical cannabis being available in New Mexico at the time, was it? It's about this time
yeah,
you're talking about, is
it's
about,
about
yeah,
4 years. Yep.
about 4 years
Um,
into it. So
the
so
program was, it was
even
small
then,
though. Still
okay.
small.
Okay, but even then, there was still that stigma and kind of maybe unassuredness, like, is medical cannabis a myth? Like, and until you actually tried it, you kind of seen firsthand. Actually, yeah, where's my pain gone? I didn't do anything else other than that cannabis rub. So, it's a very hard one because there's a lot of naysayers here in Ireland as well who will say this, that medical cannabis, it's a Trojan horse to wider legalization, but unfortunately, it's the wider legalization are using the medical argument because they're the people being left out at the moment, because of the whole prohibition around cannabis. That's what's keeping patients from accessing it here in Ireland. So I seen actually recently, seems wider legalization is coming in New Mexico. There's a bill just after being passed to the House floor recently.
Last night. Passed last
Yeah.
night. It's now on the Senate side. It's moving.
Excellent.
Let me say this, Martin, to anybody that's listening that questions it. Remember, I told you my first injury was a very, very horrible injury, and it was in 1984. And I have suffered, and I have back surgery in 1996. So I beat the hell out of my body.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had problems when I was a law enforcement officer prescribing me a cocktail of painkillers. If I wanted them, nobody would question it, right? All you got to do is look at my X-rays, and I remember, and also I, as a political operative, I still run campaigns. I always felt like the whole thing about medical cannabis was just a very clever way, and I thought it was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, but a clever way to try to eventually get to recreational, right? Where if we can pass it medically. So I did. I really just thought it was kind of, I thought it was more of a political play than it was actually based on any type of science. Found out personally that I was wrong. And what upsets me now is I could still walk into a clinic there's so much metal in my leg. It's like a refrigerator when it's cold out. I could walk into a clinic today, Martin, and they would prescribe me some of the most potent painkillers, narcotics. Mm-hmm. These are opiates. But take this little leaf, that right there behind me, and make some cream out of it. Maybe a vape pen, whatever it is, in the privacy of my own home, and get the palliative relief that you need. And if you don't suffer from chronic pain, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Because there are days when I wake up when, you just don't want to move. Yeah. And then you regret all the things that you've done and you go, why did I do that? Mm-hmm. But you see this plant is changing people's lives. And there are, PurLife, which is our dispensary. It's our company. We have 8 dispensaries. And when we first started, we started on our own. We have over 150 employees now, but it was us. And so people would walk into dispensaries and they'd recognize me and they would tell me these stories. And I'm going to tell you, Martin, there's so many of them and there's so many of these people and myself included. I was wrong, man. I was just wrong about cannabis. Yeah. And I wish I could go back and change that because I question people when they say to me, I smoke it because I'm, whatever. And I was wrong. And I regret that because I know from the people that I've talked to and myself, it has changed people's lives for the better. It is not the devil's lettuce. It is not. And we have to move past this stigma. And I get it. Look, Ireland is no different. We're doing these changes at the state level. We're not doing them at the national level. Yeah. And so it's small and it's incremental. But there are over 100,000 people in New Mexico who are registered patients. And their quality of life has improved. And what? Versus getting hooked on some cocktail of narcotic painkillers. It's no brainer. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely a no brainer.
But
So
at least give the individual a freedom of choice. It's like when you go to your plain clinic, it's like, oh, we have these cannabis-based medicines or we have these narcotic-based drugs. Which do you choose to? And I let the individual make the choice outside of having to face the stigma and go somewhere else to get it. It's,
also, too, Martin, as I said to you, I'm 3rd generation Irish American. And my great-grandfather came here from Nina in 1885. And my grandfather was a professional prize fighter in Niagara Falls and very successful. Okay. And he started fighting in 1919. And shortly after that, in the United States, was prohibition. And my grandfather took his earnings and parlayed them into a rather lucrative bootlegging operation. And he opened up some speakeasies. And then shortly after Prohibition ended, because they realized that was a failure,
Yes.
they started fighting over the legitimate distributorships. Because being my grandfather was part of kind of an Irish gang, and they were trying to control that part of Niagara Falls, and the Italian gang was trying to control their part. So a lot of the violence that was associated with the Prohibition hadn't really left yet, because now everybody was trying to be legitimate. And in October of 1934, my grandfather was murdered, and he was murdered as a byproduct of Prohibition. Had it never happened, my grandfather would have lived, hopefully, a long life. And so I always say that my family, my father, who was 10 at the time, he had to move. It became a very bad thing, and so, you know, I always say that I'm a product of a crime scene, because had my father not moved away, he never would have met my mother. And so I understand firsthand as well. You know, not just not just from a social perspective, but I also get it from the violence. And believe me, being in law enforcement as long as I was, I have seen things that people shouldn't see. And for what? For what? For a plant.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's something I bring up here. I do a little 420 news. I kind of cover the ongoings of the daily kind of drug raids and stuff of our Gardaí here in Ireland. And I bring it up every time that at any moment our Gardaí could enter the wrong house where the wrong person is there armed with a gun. And we could be talking about a guard losing his life over a little bit of cocaine or a little bit of plant even, whatever the drug might be. It's just why are we doing this to our people are out there? Because like even yourself, when you put on the badge, the uniform, you wanted to go out there and make your community safer. But unfortunately, actually, by enforcing prohibition, you're kind of being counterproductive to that aim.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've also done is, you know, we are under this impression that a jail cell is capable of shaking someone's addiction. And I'm not talking about cannabis, because people don't get addicted to cannabis, but on the stronger drugs, the stronger narcotics, we've always operated, well, we'll just lock them up, and then they'll see the error of their ways. And first of all, they get as much of the drugs in jail as they do on the streets. And so basically what we were doing, you know, I referred to it as turnstile justice. We kick them into the system, don't give them any treatment whatsoever, a means to shake that addiction, put them back on the streets, and then go, how come they're back in jail? Well, because we you know, it's designed to fail. And so, and also, you give somebody the opportunity to make their life better. And we can do that with treatment. And it doesn't mean that at some point you don't hold somebody accountable. It just means that, and again, we need to move away from that structure. We do, but it's not going to change in America that much. But we had better start investing in treatment for folks who get in trouble, because people are still going to get in trouble, obviously. And most of it has a nexus to drug abuse. And so that is one thing I've also become very outspoken about, is ensuring that as we go forward, people who do find themselves before a judge, that there is efficient, effective treatment available, so that they can get their lives cleaned up and become functioning members of society. Mm-hmm. And we just do not do that.
No, we definitely don't. I think Portugal has made the best effort in Europe so far, where they kind of make, when you get caught with drugs, they put you into the health diversion program rather than actually going even in front of a judge. It's a kind of a health tribunal, and they determine then whether you need intervention because of your drug use. So it's a nice, it's a much more actual true health-led approach there. You're taking the individual into consideration. They're actually meeting them, talking with them. And at that point, they can determine how best to help them. I believe over in Portugal that they do things like if you're an employer and you hire somebody who's had an addiction, the government will kind of subsidize the wage there by kind of incentivizing you to employ these people, giving them a role back in society. Because I don't know if you're aware of Gabor Mate and his work around addiction, but he talks a lot about addiction being the opposite to addiction being a connection. That these people who are addicted, actually, they're just really absent of connection, community, friends, family, um,
Absolutely.
and we punish them then because of that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it'd be my hope at some point uh, that I could lend my experience. As I said, it's my ancestral home. I'm
mhm.
very people that know me know everyone knows I'm Irish because I talk about it all the time, and I'm very proud of it. And so I would love to be able to lend my support and then also lend my experience. As somebody, as I said, I was a drug warrior.
Mm.
I remember one time we were talking early on, years ago, probably 25 years ago, the whole debate came up about harm reduction
Mhm.
and providing people with clean needles. And I remember at one point I was like, well, then, why don't we just provide serial killers with guns? And when I was having a conversation with somebody about it,
Yeah.
I think back about that now, and it's like, what where did that even come from?
Yeah.
But again, you're indoctrinated in a system, right?
Yeah.
I was, this is what I did,
Yeah.
and I dedicated my life to it. But now I realize now it's like, my God, that makes all the sense in the world.
Mhm.
That it truly is, and that's what we should be. We should be talking about harm reduction,
Yeah.
as it relates to drugs, and just as you said, I think it's very, very important. There's nobody that I know of that's addicted to drugs that would think for a second that this is how I want to continue. They want that opportunity. They want the tools to be able to rid themselves of that. But as we also know, it's incredibly difficult. I'll share an experience with you, Martin.
Yeah.
We have Narcan here, and
On
we've had it
Narcan,
for
yeah.
a while. And I had been on many calls where the person was probably clinically dead. And the paramedics would hit them with the Narcan, and probably within minutes, if not seconds, of saving their life. And the person would wake up and literally want to fight us
Mhm.
because we destroyed their high.
Yeah.
And even when you tell them that you were pretty much dead when we got here, they were upset because the Narcan obviously reversed the effects.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was the other thing that made me think about it as well. It's like, wow, I mean, you basically saved this person's life, but that high is so important to them. They're upset that they didn't get to experience all of their hit or whatever it was. And it just made me think about it. I used to sit there and walk away going, wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, you've
But
effectively.
now it's because it's the addiction.
Yeah.
It takes over their life.
But definitely, I think a lot of these people, they like that dissociatedness. That they're a lot of them, I suppose. What we're talking about here, down to the depths where they're injecting, kind of, and being found in overdose conditions. These people are trying to escape something. They don't want to be faced with reality. Next, they get hit with Narcan. The opiates kind of wiped off the receptor, and they're snapped back to reality. And it's like, oh no, they're not happy. And next, you're there in front of them, and you're, I just saved your life. And you're like,
Yeah,
they would rather be dead. Like a lot of them,
you just ruined my
unfortunately.
high.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, we saved your life. It's like, no, you ruined my high. I'm like, oh my God, okay. But it
Yeah,
makes
that must
you,
have been
again, it makes you
frustrating.
think about it, right? It shows you the depth of it, and it shows you how hard it is to shake that addiction for someone.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, it's unfortunate that still to this day, even after all these years of having this war on drugs going on, these people still are treated in this way. They're still out there getting their drugs off of drug dealers who are violating them, taking advantage of them, and they're injecting on streets, corners. And we've had a debate here in Ireland going on around supervised drug injection centres, and they were supposed to have one established in Dublin in 2019. The HSE put in like this planning application, and somebody else within another department of the HSE put in an objection against it. So the HSE objected against their own planning. It was a nightmare. So there's no injection facility there now still. So injecting drug users are still out there not getting the help they need, unfortunately.
It'll come, Phil Martin.
It will,
It will.
yeah. And I suppose
It's
that
just
is
like
that's a bit off topic, I suppose, a bit from what we're talking about with yourself, because you're here to talk about the medical cannabis facility. But I suppose with your role as a police officer, you've seen the extent of the war on drugs. But in that, I suppose, as the laws have changed somewhat in America, and you've seen laxing of certain states around cannabis laws, how much has changed around Albuquerque and its use as a kind of a drug corridor into the rest? Has that reduced somewhat now? Or are you seeing the changing of the types of drugs now, because cannabis, I suppose, is not as lucrative now for the dealers?
the cartels are still very much involved in methamphetamines.
Yeah.
That's still a huge problem here in the Albuquerque area. As far as it's interesting,
Mhm.
we have had an impact on cannabis, and I think part of it is that, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's very important that we pass recreational adult use cannabis, because again, the way we grow it, it's engineered so much differently, and most of the product that would come out of Mexico is probably 7-8% THC. God only knows what pesticides that they use in the fields. We grow in our indoor facility. It's like a clean room for a computer chip manufacturer. And we spent millions of dollars on the facility to make sure that only the finest and highest quality products are made. But it also is, as many people know, much of our different strains can be between 25 and 30% THC.
Yeah.
And so we have seen an impact from that standpoint. People prefer how it's being grown here versus how it's being grown. Don't get me wrong. It's still a problem. Mexico still brings a lot of cannabis into the country,
Okay.
but the market in the United States and our shift to medical and adult use has clearly impacted the cartels in Mexico. It's had an impact on it, and that's a good thing. But unfortunately, the cartels are not going. They're not going to stop doing what they do, and so we see, obviously, methamphetamines right now is something that is a huge concern in our community, and it's a horrible drug. It's
Mhm.
such a horrible drug. I was involved in a case 25 years ago, one of the worst cases that I ever was involved in. And it was a father who was strung out on methamphetamines, who killed his son because he thought his son was the devil.
Okay,
A
yeah.
person who was otherwise, before he became addicted to methamphetamines, he was fine.
Mhm.
And so, but yeah, has it had an impact? Yes. Anytime you debate these issues before your legislative body like we are talking about putting in the regulations to control the black market. Because what the hell's the sense of doing this if that's not a component of it? If you're not going to try to take the violence out of the drug trade,
Yeah.
that clearly should be part of what you're trying to do. And I know that our governor in New Mexico and our legislature is very concerned about that. And so, yeah, there's no question about it. We're still a medical state.
Mhm.
But even in that, with 100,000 patients, we've had an impact on the Mexican drug trade as it relates to marijuana.
Yeah. And your own facility, then, I suppose, your own cannabis production, you've really grown over the years, pardon the pun, but you started with a 3,000 square foot facility, and you're now at, I don't know, is it 30,000 or are you at more?
60, we're at
60,000.
60,000.
Okay, so how many cannabis plants is that you're harvesting? I suppose that's a lot, is
A
it?
lot,
A lot.
a lot. Obviously, we don't talk a lot about the actual production facilities. They're highly obviously coming from a law enforcement background, we spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of money fortifying the facilities.
Yeah.
But they are my partner, Ryan Gomez, is a master grower. He is somebody that has really perfected the process. He can grow up to 3-4 pounds of light. And so he's very, very good at it. High quality. Very sorry.
Yeah, good.
Somebody got his attention. Blue, stop. Sorry. And so yes, it's again, a lot of emphasis. One of the things I always said is when we start, I'm so sorry. He'll stop in 1 second. He just had to be part of the show, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Blue, come here. Get over here and stop. You're actually not being a nuisance. One of the things that I said is that when you look at the criminal element, right, there's two things that many criminals want. They want drugs and they want money. Well, we have both. And so it made us at higher risk. And so we have really invested a lot in not just the protection of our production facilities, but also our dispensaries. And we started by ourselves, Martin. It was my partner's idea. Originally, he was a firefighter who I knew, and he came to me because I had done government contracts and asked me if I would write it. And at that point, I was like, sure, I'm fine with it. And we've been very successful. As I said, we have 8 dispensaries. I remember the first day we opened, it was my son, who's also a partner of mine. We opened our first store, and we did in America, we did $300 that day. And after the day was over, we looked at each other and we went, today was a good day.
Yeah.
Somebody came in the store. And so as any business, we pride ourselves on having, very, very high quality product. We put a lot of time and effort to make sure that we're growing just superior quality. And then as far as our dispensaries, we're very proud of the fact that we have a reputation of having some of the nicest employees. And look, it's for a lot of people, they're coming in for the first time in their life and they're saying, I want to try something different. I don't want to take painkillers anymore. Walk me through this process. And it really takes a lot of care and compassion and patience.
Yeah.
Because again, maybe you very much understand all of the aspects of medical cannabis. When whether it's indica or sativa, what you're using it for, they're not. The other thing that we also have learned is that for many people, they experimented or didn't experiment, they just used it 40 years ago. And as I said, 40 years ago, cannabis was about 7% THC. So we remind and caution our patients that cannabis at 25%, the old days of passing around a pre-roll and everybody just keep passing it around and passing it around, that day is gone. Because if you just keep passing around 25 to 30% THC, you're going to find yourself in the bubble real quick.
Yeah.
And so,
well, if it's your first time, and if you haven't the tolerance up there.
And so that's the other part of the caution that we give.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if somebody was to come into you, they haven't tried cannabis, I suppose, before at all, that they're completely new to it. What kind of products would you have there for, say, somebody who's looking to deal with some sort of a chronic pain issue, say if they have a back pain, let's say? What would you be?
I would say, like, again, if it's me, I use my own experience. I'm more of an indica person.
Yeah.
I'm pretty high strung to begin with. And so I don't want that kind of that lift that you can receive from a sativa.
Yeah.
And I use it, sorry. And I, obviously for sleep, that's probably the biggest thing is that, people, the hardest thing for people with chronic pain is is sleep. Yeah. And so indica, there are people obviously that during the day, if they're looking for pain relief, we talk about sativas. The other thing that's really important as well and it's been in my experience, is using the edibles.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a time release.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit slower, and it's a little more gradual. And so that is important for people, again, that maybe haven't used it or never used it. It comes on a little bit slower. It lasts a little bit longer. And so those are all the things that we educate our patients about. We give them booklets. We have full color brochures on, what it is you are dealing with, what is the specific condition you're dealing with. For New Mexico, it's primarily PTSD and chronic pain. Those over 50% of all of our patients are either one of the two.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. All right, I've seen a lot of studies out there looking at cannabis for PTSD, and despite what some of the addiction specialists might say here, that cannabis will make you suicidal and depressed, actually, what the people with the PTSD finds, no, actually, I like a bit of cannabis and to walk out in nature and to refine myself in life again.
And I do a radio show here. I host a radio show from 1 to 3. And it's political talk. And so I brought up, everybody knows what I do. But occasionally I get the callers that, it's just like you said, oh my God, they're going to be robbing banks before you know it. Zombies walking down. But see, that's the old Reefer Madness mentality.
Yeah.
But I also remind people that in New Mexico, it's almost 70%. It's over 70% in some of the surveys of the people that support recreational adult use cannabis. And of course, medical is even higher.
Yeah.
And so, there's some people that are just, for whatever reason, they're still hanging on to the past. They don't want to let go. And so, and I always say, it's always so funny too, because speaking of products that could chill somebody out, it works on dogs too. Don't think it doesn't. He gets CBD products at times because he's a big dog and he gets aches and pains occasionally. So some of the CBD even works on dogs. It's very effective. But that's the old reefer mentality, the Reefer Madness mentality that people are gonna. It's actually that's that poster that's behind me. Those are real, Martin. Those are absolutely real.
Yeah.
And it talks about debauchery and wild orgies and reckless abandon. And at first I thought they were fake, and then I did some reading and found out they're not.
No, they're legal.
Those are the scare tactics that they used, and some people still use them.
Yeah, I done an honours degree here in Ireland in Herbal Science, and I pretty much tried to focus on cannabis. Every opportunity I got to do a self-guided project, it was cannabis, pharmacology of cannabis, history of cannabis, everything cannabis, and I kind of got a bit ridiculed for it. But I would meet some of the herbalists who are practitioners of herbal medicine in Ireland, and I would question them on cannabis. And even not just recently, about 2 months ago, I questioned a very well-known herbalist there about medical cannabis, and she turned around and was like, "But there's much better plants for me to be dealing with. I don't want to talk about cannabis at all." And it just really annoys me because it's incredibly beneficial. And these people are probably the most well-equipped to be talking about herbal medicines and stuff here in Ireland. But unfortunately, it's people like myself. And I suppose I got into this because I got caught with cannabis by a person in authority when I was 17. And rather than being brought home to my mum and dad and to be told off, I was actually brought to the judge. I was given a court case and things like that. And that just set me down the road of activism. I kind of started asking questions. Where did this law come from? How did it come about? And that led me then to do my actual the degree. But we set up, while I was doing my degree in college, I set up Students for Sensible Drug Policy. It's an organization that originated in America, actually, about 20 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah, so you're aware of that group, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah, brilliant. A very good group, well run. It's kind of like worldwide now at this stage. But we held Reefer Madness events where we would do screenings in our cinema and play the movie and have talks afterwards. And it was so funny.
Those videos were crazy.
They were so funny. Like
you see them and you go, my God, even all right, maybe they're 70 years old, but that's still insane. It's just, but some of it persists today.
That's what you're saying. Yeah, that's some of it still persists today.
Here, especially we have the debate going on now for adult use, and I'm sad by it, Martin, because I'm still a Republican, and I'm a conservative, and I'm sad because the recreational cannabis bill is probably going to pass. It's got a good chance this time, and I don't even know if a single Republican will vote for it.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And and some of the things that I hear, and again, I respect differing opinions. I do. But some of the things that I hear about, the addiction and again, very much a throwback to, all these, oh my God, if the kids are going to start smoking cannabis, look out, because the next thing they're going to be in zombie cults killing each other. And I'm sorry to hear that. I am, because I really, what I do enjoy, because I love the political process. I love good, robust, intellectual debate.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy to go back to that whole, oh my God, the kids will go crazy, be prepared for that.
Yeah. Well, that's what's absent here from the conversation is a rational debate. It's the prohibitionists are, no, we're going to bang on our message of prohibition, and we're going to completely avoid any debate. In the Dáil last Thursday last week, Gino Kenny, a TD here in Ireland, he put the question to the minister who's in charge of our drug policy around the possibility of legalizing cannabis. And he was like, absolutely not. And I'm not going to decriminalize it either, because decriminalizing it will lead to legalization. And we can't be having that in Ireland at all. We're going to take a health-led approach to our drug policies. That was his response, health-led approach. And it's completely counterproductive to that, as you're probably well aware of now.
As I said, it'll happen though. It'll take time.
I from time to time would have people in authority actually watching my show, because I'm kind of a bit of a thorn in the side of them here. I call protests and demonstrations around the need for legalization. So if there was a person in authority out there who was to be watching my show, maybe they're getting paid to keep an eye on me. What would be your message to a person in authority here in Ireland around the decriminalisation of cannabis or the drug?
The big thing would be, as I said to you, is that there are plenty of stories, people like myself, that have suffered over the years, and they looked for something different, and the cannabis plant has provided them a better quality of life. And isn't that really, from a matter of public policy, isn't that what we want? We want to provide people. The other part of it too is, I'm an adult. I can make decisions for myself that I think are beneficial, without doing harm to someone else. And that's the big issue for me, is that I use cannabis. I use it for sleep. I use it for pain relief. And when I do it, I've never harmed anyone else. I will also tell you this. I have met a ton of experience on the street as well as a patrolman. I also worked in DWI. I've arrested thousands of people for DWI. Martin, I would say to anybody that was listening, ask any person that is in a law enforcement role in Ireland right now, would you much rather deal with somebody who's highly intoxicated or somebody that has used a little bit of cannabis or maybe even high on cannabis? Mm-hmm. If that person says to you, the person that's extremely drunk, they're lying to you. Because the person that I always dealt with, and my joke always was, with the person that was using cannabis, I tell you, some of the worst fights I ever got into, a cop with people were drunk. Hello, we all know that. We know that happens. So, but then also, as I said, that message is also listen to the people. They get it. Mm-hmm. They get it. They're not. They will be so surprised, as I was, of how many of my friends smoked cannabis but never wanted to tell me until I was sitting at a dispensary selling it. And they started walking in And I went, smoke cannabis? And I was like, well, we're never going to tell you, Darren, you're a cop. In fact, you're the sheriff. And they're like, yeah, I've been smoking it for years. And so they would be surprised, no matter who they are and what position of authority they're in, how many people around them tonight are high.
Yeah.
And they're doing okay. And they're not hurting anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hope that they would understand that. That it's not, it is not what they think it is. It's just not.
And I suppose you've already said on the show that if you had your time over again, knowing what you know now, you would have done things so much more differently, I suppose, in your role. Even though you said actually you were probably one of the nicer cops, kind of just allowing the kids an opportunity to dump out their cannabis and be afforded that chance to kind of change their ways. Maybe if I was afforded that opportunity back then, I wouldn't have reacted as I did.
Drug courts help. I mean, drug courts are important. It's a good start. A very, very good start. But, and I always go back to, as I said, I know I was on both sides of it. You make no question about it. I was the drug czar for the state. I was involved in national programs that dealt with narcotics interdiction. And I was the biggest skeptic there could possibly be. And then I learned, and some people will say, oh my God, you did it because now you're in the business. Well, the change came first. But I also think that I bring a great deal of experience with it, not only just because I was a law enforcement officer, because I beat the hell out of myself so bad. As I said, we have a big debate in America, still to this day. You cannot smoke cannabis because it's still a Schedule I narcotic in the United States. It is no different than heroin or cocaine. Yeah. So technically, I'm not supposed to have a gun, right? Well, I'll tell you, Martin, I have more guns than probably somebody should have because I like guns. I have assault rifles, whatever you want to call them. I got pistols because I like them. Mm-hmm. Nobody had a problem with it when I was taking prescription narcotics. Nobody said to me, whoa, wait a second. You take prescription narcotics because your leg is destroyed. Yeah. You've had back surgery. You fractured your back. But oh my God, you mean you take a gummy that has THC in it? You better give those guns up. Yeah. And so, as I said, we still have our debates, and there is still a lot of room for the United States. And the changes are coming at the state level. Mm-hmm. And maybe that will be how it eventually that's where it's driven. It's driven by the state level. It's driven by the local level. It's driven by people like you who are willing to talk about cannabis in a rational, intellectual way, separate from all of the madness and the lack of any basis in fact, because it's so easy, right? I mean, if you're opposed to it, all you're gonna say, oh my God, is that really what we want our kids to do? No, we don't. I don't want my kids consuming alcohol. I don't want my kids consuming cannabis. But when they're grown adults, as I said, my son is a partner of mine. He's involved in it, and he's a lawyer, and he's done really well for me. He's a very smart kid. I always say that he probably got that from his mom. But we sat down and we started talking about this, and we were talking about cannabis. At one point he's like, some of that stuff that we smoked in high school. What do you mean that you smoked in high school? And he's like, I know, shocker, Dad. I just didn't tell you. You were the sheriff, Dad. Of course I didn't tell you that I smoked cannabis. And he goes, but I did with my friends, and I didn't get any trouble. And what did he also say? I didn't hurt anybody either. I never hurt anybody. I didn't get behind the wheel of a car intoxicated, and I didn't kill 4 or 5 people, because that doesn't happen. Now, we don't want people, I'm not saying at all, you don't drive impaired. You don't. If you use cannabis, don't drive. We very much are going to be involved when adult cannabis comes up in an educational campaign about doing it responsibly. But I can't tell you, Martin, in New Mexico, we were one of the leaders in the country for alcohol-related fatalities.
Oh, really?
And back when I did that, can't tell you how many people I pulled dead out of a car, how many kids I pulled dead out of a car because of alcohol. But I never did that and went, oh my God, those kids must have been smoking pot.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I don't condone it. I'm not trying to condone it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that to me, alcohol, it can be like anything else. If you abuse it, it can be bad.
Definitely.
But I will tell you, most people that I know, I love reggae music. I even actually loved reggae music as a cop, and I go to reggae shows, and of course, all the time. Actually, I went with a whole bunch of cops. Loved it. And we would joke with each other and go, the whole damn auditorium is high. Most of us were always like worried, like, oh my God, what if we get tested? I mean, are we going to get a contact guy here? But you looked around you, and everybody, a lot of people were using, obviously it's a part of the culture. And you look at it and you go, they're not hurting anybody. They're having fun. They're high. They're listening to the music. They're dancing. Now separate that and go into a bar where somebody's drunk off of their butt. And yeah, they could hurt somebody because they become belligerent, or whatever. And so there are differences, and people should understand that there are differences.
Yeah, no, there's definitely big differences, and I think Ireland would benefit a lot actually if we were allowed the alternative, the alcohol through cannabis, because I've seen a lot of people go back to alcohol from cannabis because there's no social avenues here for people who consume cannabis at the moment. If you consume cannabis in Ireland, you have to kind of just chill out at home, and you don't have a place where you can go and hang out with people, with other like-minded people. So yeah, definitely it would be great to see that alternative. But with the drink driving and the drug driving, I suppose there definitely is a need for better education there around driving and impairment. But because currently Ireland has probably one of the lowest tolerable limits for THC in all of Europe. I don't know if even all the world. It's like 1 nanogram per milliliter of blood.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it's if you were smoking next to me and I breathe in just a little bit, I would have too much THC in my system, and I wouldn't even ever need to be high. And our laws actually here differentiate that. If I have it in my system, then I could get up to 2 years. But if I have
we're trying to figure that out, Martin.
Yeah, but if I have it in my system,
I get asked about because we don't have. There is a presumptive level for alcohol and driving in New Mexico. It's 0.08%. And you're presumed to be intoxicated if you're at that level.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge for cannabis. There's no question, because we don't, in fairness, and I've testified to this, if somebody uses cannabis, I used cannabis last night to sleep, and I wake up in the morning, I'm fine.
Yep.
I mean, I slept and I'm fine. But I'm still going to have that cannabis in my system. If something happened and I got into a car accident and blood was drawn from me, yeah, I'm still, it's in my system. Yeah. But am I impaired? And that's what we don't know yet. We do not have enough empirical data like we do with alcohol. And even though you can argue, the presumptive levels even for alcohol used to be higher. And everybody knows that for women it's different. And so, but we've got to do a lot of, we need to do more study on that so that we can figure that out. So that somebody that maybe used cannabis 4 or 5 days ago, and they have it in their system, and that was detected, that doesn't mean that they are impaired. And that's the important part of it. And we haven't done that yet. We haven't done it in the United States, and we sure as hell haven't done it in New Mexico.
Okay, yeah, you don't use roadside impairment. It's you use the breathalyzer, I suppose, or the drug test
For alcohol,
for alcohol.
yes, we do have what we can call, they're called drug recognition experts, and they try to, um, again, a lot of those cases are lost
Oh, really?
because the attorneys can argue just what I said to you. Yeah, they smoked cannabis a week ago.
Yeah.
Were they impaired by that? No, it's in their system because it could be in their system for up to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're still working on that. Hasn't been resolved. But the other thing that we also say is if we are using cannabis as responsible adults,
Yeah.
we don't put ourselves in those positions to where something like that could happen. And we educate, as I said, even with our medical cannabis, we educate people all the time. Not just heavy equipment. You don't use cannabis and decide to go out to the shooting range. And you know really what it is? It's common sense.
That's true too. And I suppose just on the topic of education, you talked a lot about educating the consumers and stuff. But you mentioned you've 150 staff. You mentioned a master grower, but what are kind of roles would be filled within that staff, and what kind of education would come with that, then, or maybe training programs for those different roles?
Yeah, it's a great question because obviously for years, the program started, and we refer to them as prohibition growers.
Okay.
And so we got a lot of people that came in and said, "I've been growing for a few years."
Yeah.
And so you understand what they said. And so, yeah, we hired them. Of course we did. We do have some regulations in New Mexico. You can have the one thing that you could not have done is trafficked in drugs, narcotics.
Yeah.
You could have been convicted of trafficking narcotics. That will be an issue.
Yeah.
But possession, mere possession, things like that, the state is okay with that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we hire them. But you got to remember, there is a huge difference between growing in your basement and then growing a perpetual grow, where you're harvesting at any time hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And so we worked with a consultant in Colorado that had his own business there. He's actually one of our partners as well. And so we've developed a training program on how to use the techniques that we feel are the most productive for us. And it's worked out very, very well. And so and it's constantly ongoing. We are now transitioning to LED lights. And so that's a new aspect of it, where we were hand watering before. And so we're transitioning now into the drip systems, things like that. And so it's always ongoing, right? I mean, it's always changing. There's always new grow techniques. There's always new strains. Everything is always different. Same thing for the dispensary. When we are looking for, obviously, it's no different than if you work for an Apple store or if you want to work for PurLife.
Okay.
You gotta be friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be patient and you've got to be compassionate. And you need to be willing, obviously, to understand cannabis. We don't mandate that they're patients. Our employees don't have to be patients. It helps.
Yeah.
But the same thing, we teach them, about the different products. And I can tell you something, it is not hard to hire employees. When we open up a new store, we'll be opening up a new store within the next month.
Excellent.
We'll probably have 300-400 people apply for 20 positions.
Wow, jeez, that's high demand. Crazy. I think
You want to be in the industry.
Yeah, I think I seen it reported that there's almost 320,000 people across America employed in the legal cannabis industry. That was put out by Leafly there the other day.
Yeah, absolutely. No question whatsoever about that.
Massive number of people.
And we anticipate this year in New Mexico alone, the medical cannabis will exceed 200. It was actually $207 million.
Wow.
The industry. It is now one of the largest industries in New Mexico.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier there's 100,000 patients registered on the New Mexico system. And what's the population of New Mexico, just for
2 million.
2
We're
million.
about 5%. I think it's
Wow.
5%. Yeah.
So 2 million, that's crazy. So in Ireland, just for comparison, like we have 4 million in Ireland, and we have 50 people who have access to medical cannabis here. 50, 50. It's and you've 2 million
It breaks
versus
my heart. It breaks my
it-
heart, Martin, because I know, as I said, I know how many people can benefit, how many people can have a better quality of life
Hmm,
separate from narcotic painkillers.
yeah,
I know that. I see them not just when I look in the mirror, but also the people that come into the store. And as I said, it brings tears to my eyes sometimes because I'm emotional about it.
hmm,
Part of that emotion was that um, I wished I'd have realized earlier. I just, that this was not a sleight of hand political trick by NORML and other organizations to try to get cannabis. They realized they never could get adult use, but medical could
medical,
be the
yeah.
answer. And I wished I would have realized that. I wish I would have had a better open mind about it. Um, and as I said, I do now. And I wish that for Ireland. As I said, I am somebody that, I have a deep sense of connection to Ireland. And it's something I'm very proud of. And anything that I can do personally by sharing my experience with you and others, whether that means testifying, I'd be willing to do that. Because again, it's not just a person that comes from the perspective of law enforcement, but also political. I get it. There's a lot of people that it's hard for us. We become so entrenched in our beliefs, and we think that it's a sign of weakness if we should ever say, "Well, I'm against cannabis," and then go, "Well, now I'm not." That's somehow a reflection of weakness on your part. Well, we should all change. We should all be willing to recognize, like the people in New Mexico 20 years ago, half of the people in this state didn't agree with medical cannabis, let alone recreational. Now it's 70. Um, and so you'll get there, man. You'll
Yeah.
get there.
Well,
And I hope and I pray I do, because I understand, and it's not just the people with the chronic pain and the PTSD. It's those children who suffer from those seizures. There's so much good that comes from it, and it sure as hell outweighs anything that could be considered the bad from it.
certainly.
And regulate it and tax it. It's we're used to that.
Mhm.
We get it. Um,
Yeah, well,
and I think once you get past that, I said, from your political leaders, it'll take some time working with them to understand that it's not a sign. As I said, I wished it didn't take me as long. I still meet with Gary, kind of coming full circle. I meet with Gary once in a while, and he laughs at me and he says, "If you only would have listened to me." And I'm one of those people that says, not that I told you so, but
yeah.
but Gary was right. Gary was absolutely right. He saw it. He recognized it for what it was. It was part of the libertarian blood in his DNA,
Yeah.
which is something that is important to me now too. But I was indoctrinated as a cop, and it was just hard for me to move past that.
Yeah.
Um,
It would be tough to be not to be kind of indoctrinated by that stuff, really. Um,
yeah,
and I suppose even given your kind of a lineage there with your grandfather, I suppose maybe there was kind of a knock-on effect there, maybe against kind of drugs in the family because of the murder of your grandfather, and to do with the feuding, I suppose, going on with the drugs trade, even though it would have been alcohol, but it's still a drugs trade.
yeah. No, and I didn't even learn about my grandfather until after my father died.
Okay.
It hurt him so bad that, again, he was 10 years old.
Just
He
kept
lost
it
his
in.
hero.
Yeah.
Um, and so I learned about it afterwards. And so you're right. Again, you recognize and you look back, and it's hard to even imagine in America that we, at one point, you couldn't sell alcohol.
Mhm.
That's hard to even imagine.
Yeah, imagine trying to do that today. You wouldn't get away with
Exactly.
it.
But Mark, that's the point, though. There'll
Yeah.
be in 20 years, 30 years, we'll look back and go, what was all that? What was everybody so
Yeah.
emotional about? And I just hope that, we and I say we because I believe those of us in the industry have a responsibility, not just for our communities as well. If you truly understand and know the benefit and the quality of life that people experience from this, then those of us in the industry, we have an obligation, I feel, and a moral responsibility to help other countries as well. And because again, it's not, the cannabis isn't any different here than it is in Ireland or anywhere else. It has incredible medicinal value to it. I know a lot of people that work very, very hard at their jobs, and they like to go home at night and they sometimes drink a glass of wine or maybe have a beer. And they do that to relax a little bit and unwind.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get to that point where it's not looked at or frowned upon or looked at anything other different when somebody goes home and says, I'm going to have a gummy bear, or I'm going to hit my vape pen, or whatever it is, because I've worked hard. I'm a responsible person, and I want to take it easy and relax. And we'll get there. We will.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I definitely see time is coming here. While you have a bill that's going to be passed very soon in Mexico, Ireland has a bill going forward in June or July, and it's going to be a cannabis control and regulation bill. There's not much optimism there that it will be received very well, but I'm hoping I can kind of stir up a bit of momentum there within the community of kind of supporters, activists out there, and to get the line, the bill supported and get it across the line. But I suppose on the bill and your own facility, and I'm aware, sorry if I'm keeping you any longer than that
You're
I
fine.
could get you. But if
Blue's okay too.
brilliant, thanks, Blue, for hanging in there. If this bill is to be passed, what does that mean for yourselves? Because you were mentioning earlier that your facility, it's like very high end, almost like a clean room environment where they make computer chips and pharmaceuticals. But if recreational cannabis was to be voted in New Mexico, and you were to get into that market, then would that change the standards of your facilities have to be kept, because then you wouldn't be producing what's seen as a medicine? Or
Yeah. Not the standards, the
you would
techniques.
yeah, the techniques, yeah.
Because we would, again, we pride ourselves on the quality of the product. And again, you're putting this in your body.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we want to make sure that, we maintain those standards and those protocols that have been so successful for us.
Yeah.
What will be different is we grow because we have a plant count under the medical program. And so we tend to grow very, very big plants. We use techniques, we give them more square footage, we give them more opportunity to grow. We use nutrients, they're called advanced nutrients. They're some of the best in the world, but they're very expensive.
Yeah, I know.
So what's that?
I know.
Yeah, they are. They're very
The advanced
expensive,
nutrient stuff.
especially in a facility as big as ours. And I'm the person that writes the checks.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, but so what we would do is, and I'm not saying we'd give up advanced or anything, but we would go to a system where we grow those bigger giant monsters, probably to where we would do more sea of green. Okay. Because obviously with adult use, we're going to see the demand increase exponentially. And so we have to take, and we'll grow, we'll be probably looking at other facilities, probably using some more outdoor greenhouses. And again, also going to the drip system, things like that, but giving each plant a smaller footprint and flipping them more so that the perpetual grow is a lot more continuous. Nice. So we're able to keep up. We have 1,715 plants that we're allowed to grow currently. And and as I said, that technique is, we grow them as big as we possibly can to make sure the yields help us. We have to feed 8 stores, and so it's important for us to be able to do that through the grow techniques that we use. So the biggest difference would be we'd grow more plants but smaller plants.
More but smaller. Okay, that would be interesting. And in terms of employees, then, if that bill was to pass, would you see maybe a doubling of your employee force there to meet that? Triple even. Wow. That's what the wider adult market would mean.
At some point, we putting just together some of our basic plans. If we were to do this and go through with it, we anticipate that we would probably have 500 employees.
Wow, geez, that'd be an incredible thing to be able to do for your community.
And again, that's what we always talk about. It's not your grandpa's weed. It's a very labor intensive process when you're doing it commercially. You just don't stick them in a room and turn the lights on for 18 hours a day and poke and hope. We touch them every day. You bend them every day. We water them by hand. These things are so. I'm in shock sometimes when I hear the things that they do them because they're so temperamental. But yeah, as anybody knows, that grows, they're constantly bending them. They're constantly pruning them. We put hands on every one of our plants every single day, and sometimes numerous times a day. And so it's labor intensive. And we anticipate that obviously the number of grow employees will increase in our cultivation centers, but also our dispensaries as well. We have 8 dispensaries now. Our goal is to get to 20 within the next 18 months.
18 months. Wow. Well, that's a nice ambitious thing.
It's a pretty rapid, build out. There's no question.
Brilliant. Well, great. I don't have any more questions for you at the moment, Darren, and it's been an absolute pleasure to get to sit and chat with you. Do you have anything else you'd like to add in yourself?
Keep
anything?
The faith, darling. Keep the faith. It's coming. Like I said, again, when we look at nationally, it is still a Schedule I narcotic, but the states were able to take the lead. And many in Congress in Washington now have recognized that the states have done it. They've done it responsibly, and they've done it well. And we also, as conservatives, right? I go back to my whole thing about being a Republican conservative. We believe in states' rights, and so I support the federal government whenever they do move forward and at least make it Schedule II. That they allowed let the states' rights prevail. They were the ones that did this under the threat of prosecution. Many of the early in California, in Colorado, and some of the real pioneers. It was difficult. It was very difficult because the federal government just did not want anything to do with the states having. But then they kind of, after a while, they were like, the hell with it. And so my hope is that we will do that way, but then also recognize it's activists like you, Martin, that and people, everyday people. We are a representative form of government, and we are the way that things change. And you have to stay active, but you also have to do is educate. You have to educate people. You'd be surprised. I don't know what your public opinion surveys are, but it's changing because people, they recognize, like me again, sitting in that dispensary for the first time, watching law enforcement officers that I had worked with for years walk in and go, I guess, shut up, Darren. I just never told you. And so, but I respected that again because I realized why. I completely realized. And believe me, for law enforcement officers, the PTSD aspect of it, you can't stress that enough. As I said, we see things that people should not see, and unfortunately, that never leaves you. even when I drive around Albuquerque to this day, I'll drive by past places and I'll remember those horrible images. They're etched in your mind.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I say about our law enforcement. As much as I dislike them here in Ireland for what they do against me, I've a lot of respect for them for the job that they do, because they do have to do some like pretty unthinkable things like that. There's no sum of money justifies like seeing, as you say, young bodies and cars, and I like,
And
so
as
I
I
do have
said,
a lot of respect for them still.
yeah, and as I said to Martin, I'd be willing to lend that hand in any way that I can. I would be willing to come there. I need to come at some point and visit Nina anyway, my ancestral homeland. But I would be honored to be able to come and share my experiences, and hopefully, as far as some of the law enforcement leaders and the political leaders, maybe ease some of their fears, so that they recognize it's worked in America. It has absolutely worked in America, because at the end of the day, we're responsible, and we're not going to do something. We'll do it right.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And we don't always need the government to hold our hand in everything that we do. And with that, I'll leave you with this. Blue is finally asleep.
Passing on.
He finally passed out.
We talked the hours off him.
Again, as I said, it's Ireland is important to me. It's in my DNA. It'll always be in my DNA. And if I can share my experiences, I'd be honored to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Darren. And there you go, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that interview there with Darren White. It was great to have him on and to get to pick the brain of a man who used to be a sheriff, and now he's grown his own cannabis for patients all over the state of New Mexico. So fair play to Darren. Wish him the best of luck with PurLife as New Mexico now looks to legalise cannabis for wider adult use. So no doubt his company will continue to grow. Hey. So guys, as I said, look, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you want to support the show, support the fight for cannabis legalisation in Ireland, don't forget you can sign up to the patreon.com/Martin's World, or you can also make a donation in the form of Bitcoin through a link found on martinsworld.ie. So guys, until next time, keep her lit and stay blazed. Much love. Peace.